Greetings, YouTubers. My name is Frederick Lopez, and you are in a new episode of The Final Cut. Today, I'm going to be going over my thoughts and review of the 2003 film, Underworld. Yes, I know it's more of an action film, kind of like Blade, but it's still in the horror genre, and not many modern films have had vampires and werewolves go up against one another. No, not counting that film, not counting that film. This was the first modern movie to have lycans and vampires go up against one another. Nosferatu and werewolves, vampires, and lycans, yes. Not the first film to have vampires and lycans in the same picture, but one of the first in the modern era of movies, and one of the first to have them full out go against one another. And it's a very original type of film, and I feel that it deserves to get some recognition. I mean, after all, there's a fourth sequel coming out the beginning of next year, so let's go over the original. Now, of course, Underworld stars Kate Beckinsale, but it also stars Scott Speedman, Shane Brawley, Michael Sheen, Bill Nye, Sophia Myles. So first, what is Underworld about? Of course, it's lycans versus vampires, but really, deep down, there's more to it than that. In Underworld, vampires are a secret clan of modern aristocratic sophisticates, whose mortal enemies are the lycans, a shrewd gang of werewolves who present themselves as street thugs who prowl the city's underbelly. No one knows the origin of their bitter blood feud, but the balance of power between them turns even bloodier when a beautiful young vampire warrior named Selene and a newly turned lycan named Michael Corvin, who has a mysterious past, fall in love. It's a tale of ruthless intrigue and forbidden passion, all set against the dazzling backdrop of a timeless Gothic metropolis. Yeah, that's pretty much the story of Underworld. Now, it starts off with the character Selene, played by Kate Beckinsale, and she's a vampire. Now, vampire in their society, again, like I said in the synopsis, they're aristocratic socialites, and each of them have different clans throughout the world. But she's a warrior, and a vampire warrior at that, and she is called a death dealer. And death dealers are pretty much the ones that go out and fight the war against the lycans. And it's all underground. The rest of humanity, the rest of the world, doesn't know anything about it. So it's like Blade, where vampires and lycans are kept secret among the world. The world is just a sugar-coated topping, and Underworld is, again, an underworld beneath our own world. And she starts off fighting these werewolves. Then they find out that there's this character named Michael Corvin who gets caught in the crossfires. And there's this leader called Lucian, played by Michael Sheen, and he is believed to be dead. Now, the house is ran by Sean Bailey's character named Craven. He basically wants to marry Selene and be like the ruler, but he's a real kiss-ass type of character. And Sophia Myles is like Selene's friend, but she's kind of also her enemy. She likes to play both sides and get Craven's trust. So the whole story is pretty much wondering, why do the lycans want Michael Corvin? He's just been turned. And it's like their journey of falling in love between Scott Speedman and Kate Beckinsale's character, Michael and Selene. And you discover there's this dark secret to not only his past and previous bloodlines, but there's a dark secret that started this whole underworld, this underworld feud between lycans and vampires. And without going into too much spoilers, that's pretty much it. It's a love story set within a war action film. But it does give some horror elements. There's a lot of werewolf-lycan action, and there's a lot of great vampire effects. It's the traditional rules. There's no Twilight stuff or any new rules. It's all about, like, they can only be out in the day, sunlight burns them. Basically, old-school vampire rules are apply to this. And, Lynn Wiseman directed it and also wrote it along with Kevin Grevioux and Danny McBride. And Kevin Grevioux also plays a werewolf in this. And they said that they based Selene off of the Black Queen Selene off the X-Men comics. She was in the Hellfire Club. So there was some comic book inspirations for Selene, and there's a lot of great stunt work in this. The action is good, and there's a lot of good horror elements, but it's not exactly a suspenseful thriller type of horror film. It's just in that genre, but with action. So pretty much imagine Blade or any other action movie post-Matrix from 1999. You could tell the influence that Blade and the Matrix had on Underworld, more specifically the first Underworld. It's a really great and intriguing film. I remember first watching this when I was in 7th grade in 2003. I rented it from Hollywood Video, and it was great. I remember seeing the HBO documentary about werewolves and lichens and different mythologies, and it was just so fascinating. And it's a very original and intriguing film. Um, you get to learn not only a lot about both of them, like as far as vampires and lichens, but there's an intriguing story here with a lot of great action. Not many films can have like a hidden romance in there, but without being too over the top. And the action's really well done. Supposedly the cast and crew had 2 weeks of wire work training before working on this, which is pretty impressive. And Len Wiseman also did a lot of practical effects with the werewolves that look great. It's before all the CGI stuff. They still had practical prosthetics upon them. They also did a lot of live action stuff within the camera in one shot. So there's a scene where Michael Sheen's running towards him, and there's a lot of dread. He almost has like a T-1000 feel. But yeah, I can't say it exactly gives scares, but it is a well-crafted film. And it's interesting too. They also take a lot of horror elements. Besides Selene, Michael Corvin was derived from Corvinus, which is a reference to Matthias Corvinus of Moldavia, who is an ally of Vlad Tepes. In case you guys don't know, I said this in an earlier review for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Vlad Tepes was the inspiration for Dracula. So there's a lot of cool stuff in here. It really has a gothic feel. And yeah, they've filmed this, and it seems like Bulgaria or Hungary. But it doesn't say the location, so it's kind of like it could be anytime, anywhere. So it has a timeless vibe to it. Even though it's in 2003, this film doesn't feel dated. It just feels gothic, and it has like a vibe. It has atmosphere. And I like that. And this is Len Wiseman's first film, which is really, really surprising. It's a really well-crafted film. Definitely really good for a first film out of the gate for a director who would later on do the sequel to this and Live Free or Die Hard. The actors do a great job for the roles they're given and the material. And it's not hard to imagine Kate Beckinsale in this role now, but this is like her first action type of role. She was in mostly dramatic movie roles before taking upon Underworld. And yeah, nowadays it's a no-brainer. It's like she's kick-ass like Mila Jovovich, Linda Hamilton, or Sigourney Weaver. But this is her first action role. But there's more to the movie than the action, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. It's in the horror movie genre, but it's not your typical type of horror film. It's horror action, and not many people can pull that off convincingly, and Underworld does a great job at that. For those of you who haven't seen Underworld, first of all, where have you been? Second of all, I wouldn't have to worry. It's not like a B action film. It really is a deeper film. It's not an Oscar film by any means, but it really is a better and deeper film than you expect it to be. For those worried about just Kate Beckinsale looking sexy in leather and just showing off her ass, there's more to her character, Selene, than that. She is one of the best female heroines, not only in a horror movie or an action movie, just in a movie period. Definitely in the 21st century. She is one of the most kick-ass women you will see on film. And she plays a role. She is a character. She's an individual. And it's not just there as eye candy. She's more than eye candy. It's an actual role. And that's what was great, not only with the acting, but with the writing, is that you were able to buy the role of Selene. You were able to buy the world, and the romance between her and Michael feels genuine and feels sincere and real. Bill Nye is in it. Now, no, not Bill Nye the Science Guy. I actually thought that at first. I'm like, where is he in the movie? And I didn't realize there was an English actor named Bill Nye. But he plays Victor, does a great job. He really vamps out. There's a lot of practical effects on him, too, when he awakens. He looks all crusted and just, like, decrepit. It's just really gross. It's like somebody left a pizza to burn in an oven, and that's what came out. It is one of my favorite vampire films and werewolf films. You don't really get the both in there, but it's one of my favorite action horror movies. And does it make the final cut? Well, yeah, it actually does make the final cut. You can tell the influence Underworld has had, and it has 5 sequels. No bad movie can have that. Well, you almost had a couple. There's Resident Evil with a lot of sequels, and then that should not be. There's Resident Evil that had a lot of sequels, and then that film that should not be named had a lot of sequels. But this was the one that started it all. People would talk about, oh look, there's Twilight with vampires and werewolves. No. This film is the one that really started it all. But this is a game changer, and it's very original. And in this day of sequels, remakes, reboots, this was one of the few films to have a kind of original idea before that happened. I mean, now there's a lot of sequels, and the 2000s did have some great films, but now they're based on books, comic books, or other films, other material. And Underworld was one of the last movies out of the gate to really be original and do something new before Hollywood got crazy with all these reboots. So, what is the score I give Underworld? Well, I give Underworld a 3 out of 5, an 8 out of 10, and a B+. I would highly recommend it. It's not the best movie ever, but it's a very enjoyable and entertaining film. And it's something that is unlike any other film I have seen in recent years, and probably since this first came out, except for the sequels. If you haven't seen Underworld and you're a fan of either lichens or vampires, totally check this out, and it won't be scary. It's actually a really enjoyable action horror film. It's very hard to pull off a horror movie that's enjoyable without having that many scares. It's just all action and atmosphere, but it still is in that horror genre with vampires, werewolves, and everything just supernatural. But it does have a very intriguing story, and I would highly recommend you watching it. And yeah, for those who have seen Underworld, what are your thoughts? What do you like most about Underworld? What's your favorite Underworld film? I can tell you one thing, that the first two films are the best films. And there is a flashback scene in here that is shown later in a prequel movie, but there's a different actor. Yeah, Rona Mitro's in the prequel, and she's not in this as the person she's supposed to be, so that's different. Supposedly, I heard that they changed that for other home video releases, so I don't know. I have the original version from 2003 that had like the Resident Evil type of font here. It says widescreen special edition. But most of all, it's a very enjoyable film, and kickoff for Halloween, definitely check this out, especially if you want to like watch it and not be scared. The actors, the cinematography, the score, and Lynn Wiseman do a pretty great job. And Lynn Wiseman, you really get to see his directing skills here and his use of sets and practical effects. That's one thing I respect about him as a filmmaker, is that he uses a lot of practical effects. So definitely check it out. Well, that's just some non-spoiler stuff, but my favorite moments that contain spoilers is how Michael Corvin reacts to being introduced to this whole world. And that's one good thing about great storytelling, is that you always have to have a character who's with the audience's point of view and being introduced to this world and having to find out the rules of this world that the film is showing. I also like Selene just kicking ass, especially when she has the guns on the floor and goes through the floor. That stuff's great. Her throwing the things at the werewolves, just everything with the fighting, and then cutting Victor's head off at the end. And speaking of Victor, this has some twists and turns. Craven being a villain working with Lucian, but then this film does one crazy thing about... this film does something interesting that many other films do not do, and it shows us a villain who seems like he's evil and wants to just control the world, and he really doesn't. It's a person who's been wronged in the past, and you see that he's kind of a tragic figure when you see the full story and how the war started, and how he fell in love with Sonia, Victor's daughter, and that was just heartbreaking. Even if she does look a bit different than Rona Mitra from the Underworld Rise of the Lycans. And then, next month, check out my review of Underworld Evolution, the sequel to Underworld. Definitely check it out. I'm going to be having a review of each film in the upcoming months leading up to Underworld's Blood Wars. I would like to see how it ends, and hopefully it's better than the later sequels. That's it for this episode of The Final Cut, and feel free to look at other stuff on my YouTube channel, other reviews on the Frederick Lopez channel, and then I have some Underworld music videos on the Dark Knight of Steel channel you can check out. Until next time, this Halloween is going to be an action-packed month, so get ready to see a lot more Final Cut reviews. Most definitely.